There is an island in Greece where people forget to die. That is not poetry, that is a direct quote from the New York Times investigation. The journalist arrived expecting to write an obituary. He had been sent to find a Greek war veteran who had moved back to his home island after receiving a terminal cancer diagnosis in America. The doctors had given him 9 months to live. That was in 1976. The journalist arrived in 2012, 36 years later. The veteran was still alive. He was 97 years old, he was tending his vineyard. The cancer was gone. The journalist asked him what happened. The old man shrugged. He said he came home, reconnected with his childhood friends, started drinking the tea his grandmother made and simply forgot to die. That island is called Ikaria. Now, if you find value in what this channel uncovers, my mother said I would never amount to anything. Prove her wrong by subscribing. It takes 1 second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you know. Back to the island. Ikaria sits in the eastern Aegean Sea, 8 miles off the coast of Turkey. Its population is 10,000, no traffic lights, no fast food restaurants, no brand name pharmacies. It has a rate of dementia that is practically non-existent. 1 in 3 Ikarians lives past 90 years old. They have 50% lower rates of heart disease than Americans do. They have 20% lower cancer rates. They experience depression at a fraction of Western levels. Scientists have studied their genetics. Nothing unusual. They have studied their sleep patterns. Nothing remarkable. They have studied their social structures, their diets, their exercise habits. One factor kept appearing in every single study. The tea. Every Ikarian drinks it, every single day. They brew it from wild plants that grow on the rocky hillsides above their villages. They have been drinking it for centuries. They call it mountain tea. The plants belong to a genus called Sideritis. The name comes from the Greek word for iron. Ancient warriors used it to heal wounds from iron weapons. Modern scientists have discovered it does something far more remarkable. It protects the brain. Study after study has confirmed that Sideritis consumption correlates with preserved cognitive function, reduced inflammation, and lower rates of neurodegenerative disease. The tea that the longest living, clearest thinking people on Earth drink every single day. And here is what should stop you: cold. The same compounds exist in a plant that grows wild across the mountains of Appalachia. It carpets hillsides from Georgia to Vermont. Indigenous Americans used it for medicine for thousands of years. You have probably seen it blooming every summer. You have probably called it a weed, and you have probably never once considered brewing it into tea. The history of mountain tea begins with war. Ancient Greek soldiers carried Sideritis into battle not as a beverage, but as a wound treatment. When iron swords and spears tore through flesh, the standard field medicine was a poultice of Sideritis leaves pressed directly into the injury. The plant's name literally means of iron. Soldiers believed it could heal any wound caused by iron weapons, but the battlefield medics noticed something else. The soldiers who drank Sideritis tea recovered faster than those who only used it topically. They slept better. They thought more clearly. They returned to fighting strength while their peers were still bedridden. Word spread from the military camps to the villages. By the time of Hippocrates, mountain tea was standard Greek medicine. By the Byzantine era, monks were cultivating Sideritis in monastery gardens across the Mediterranean. By the Ottoman period, mountain villages from Albania to Turkey had developed their own regional varieties, each with slightly different properties. But nowhere was the tradition as unbroken as on the remote islands. Ikaria was isolated, no major ports, limited arable land, poor soil for grain cultivation. The island was so insignificant that most empires simply ignored it. That isolation became protection. When the rest of Greece modernized, Ikaria stayed frozen in time. When processed foods arrived on the mainland, Ikaria kept growing its own vegetables. When coffee replaced tea in Greek cities, Ikarians kept brewing the same wild herbs their great-great-grandmothers had gathered. They did not know they were preserving anything remarkable. They simply did not stop. 3,000 miles away, a parallel tradition was developing in the mountains of what would become the American Southeast. The Cherokee called it Oswego tea, named after the Oswego River region, where they first showed it to European settlers. The Haudenosaunee used it for respiratory ailments, and the Ojibwe brewed it for headaches and fevers. The plant was monarda, also called wild bergamot or bee balm. It belonged to the mint family, just like Sideritis. It grew in the same rocky mountainous terrain, produced the same aromatic compounds, and was used in almost identical ways by peoples who had never had contact with each other. When European colonizers arrived, they noticed Indigenous Americans drinking this wild tea and staying remarkably healthy. Some adopted the practice. The town of Oswego in New York medications, except without the side effects, and except in a form humans have consumed safely for 3,000 years. A 2011 study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that Sideritis improved cognitive performance in animal models. A 2015 study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that regular Sideritis consumption correlated with significantly lower rates of cognitive decline in elderly Greek populations. A 2017 study isolated specific compounds in Sideritis that crossed the blood-brain barrier and reduced neuroinflammation, the underlying driver of most neurodegenerative diseases. The evidence was stacking up. Mountain tea was not a folk remedy. Mountain tea was neuroprotective medicine that happened to taste good. Now here is where it gets interesting. Researchers began comparing Sideritis to its botanical relatives, plants in the same family, plants with similar growing conditions, and plants with overlapping chemical profiles. Monarda kept appearing, wild bergamot, bee balm, the Appalachian tea that Indigenous Americans had used for centuries. When scientists analysed Monarda's chemical composition, they found remarkable overlap with Sideritis. High concentrations of rosmarinic acid, a potent anti-inflammatory, significant levels of thymol and carvacrol, compounds with proven antimicrobial and antioxidant effects, similar terpenoid profiles that suggested similar biological activity. A 2019 study from Appalachian State University tested Monarda extracts for neuroprotective properties. The results showed significant reduction in oxidative stress markers. The American plant was not identical to the Greek plant. The functional compounds, the ones that actually affected human biology, were remarkably similar. The tea that protected Ikarian brains had a cousin growing wild in Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Virginia. The science existed, the plants existed, the traditional knowledge existed in both cultures. What did not exist was any mechanism to bring this information to the public. No pharmaceutical company could patent a wild plant. No supplement company could make medical claims without FDA approval. No agricultural lobby benefited from Americans brewing free tea from their backyards. The research stayed buried in academic journals. The plants stayed classified as ornamental wildflowers, and the knowledge stayed locked away from the people who needed it most. Here is a number that explains everything. The Alzheimer's drug market is projected to reach $13 billion annually by 2030. $13 billion, for drugs that, according to most clinical data, slow cognitive decline by a matter of months, drugs that cost tens of thousands of dollars per patient per year, drugs that Medicare and Medicaid will be forced to subsidize as the baby boomer generation ages. Now imagine a world where Americans knew that a free wild plant, growing in their own backyards, had been shown in peer-reviewed studies to protect cognitive function. Imagine if that knowledge became widespread. $13 billion would evaporate. This is not speculation about motives. This is arithmetic. The pharmaceutical industry spends more on lobbying than any other sector in America. More than oil, more than defense, more than technology. They spend $600 million per year influencing Congress and regulatory agencies. What do they get for that money? They get a system where natural substances cannot be marketed with health claims. They get a regulatory framework where proving safety for a traditional food costs millions of dollars that no one will invest. They get medical schools that teach 0 hours of nutrition and hundreds of hours of pharmacology. They get doctors who have never heard of Sideritis or Monada. They prescribe Aricept at $300 per month instead of suggesting their patients drink wild bergamot tea. But the pharmaceutical industry is only one piece. Consider the processed food industry. Mountain tea requires fresh or dried herbs. It requires boiling water and 10 minutes of patience. It cannot be manufactured at scale, packaged in an aluminum cans, and distributed through Walmart. The beverage industry is worth $200 billion annually in America. Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, Keurig de Pepper. Their business model depends on Americans drinking manufactured beverages instead of brewing their own. Every American who starts gathering wild bergamot is an American who stops buying bottled tea. Every garden planted with Monada is a customer lost to the system. Then consider the herbicide industry. Americans spend over $40 billion per year on lawn and garden chemicals. A significant percentage of those chemicals are specifically designed to kill broadleaf plants. Plants like wild bergamot. Plants like the dozens of other medicinal weeds that grow freely in American soil. The industry does not merely ignore these plants. The industry actively campaigns for their destruction. This is not conspiracy, this is market function. When traditional knowledge threatens corporate revenue, the knowledge does not get suppressed through secret meetings in dark rooms. It gets suppressed through funding priorities, through medical school curricula, through regulatory frameworks, through advertising budgets that ensure Americans know more about prescription side effects than about the plants growing in their own yards. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as designed. It was just never designed for you. Here is what they cannot take from you. Wild bergamot is native to every state east of the Rocky Mountains. It grows in meadows, along roadsides, at forest edges, and on rocky slopes. It blooms from July through September, with distinctive lavender flowers that look like fireworks frozen in mid-explosion. You can identify it by its square stem, a characteristic of the mint family, and by its strong oregano-like scent when you crush the leaves. Bees swarm around it in summer, which is why settlers called it bee balm. It is not rare, it is not protected, it is not regulated. You can gather it freely from public lands in most states. You can grow it from seed in any sunny garden bed. You can buy transplants from native plant nurseries for a few dollars each. One plant produces enough leaves for dozens of cups of tea. To prepare it, harvest the leaves and flowers during peak bloom. Dry them in a warm, airy space for 1 to 2 weeks. Store them in glass jars away from sunlight. When you want tea, take 1 tablespoon of dried material and steep it in boiling water for 10 to 15 minutes, longer than regular tea because the medicinal compounds need time to extract. The taste is floral, slightly minty with hints of oregano and citrus. You can add honey, you can blend it with other herbs, you can drink it hot or cold. The Ikarians drink 2 to 4 cups daily. They have done so for generations. They experience virtually no dementia. You do not need a prescription. You do not need insurance approval. You do not need to ask permission from anyone. The plant is waiting. It has always been waiting. Your ancestors knew about these medicines. Indigenous Americans built entire healing traditions around them. Greek villagers preserved them through centuries of empire and occupation. That knowledge nearly died. It nearly vanished under the weight of pharmaceutical marketing and processed food convenience. But nearly as not completely, you're watching this video, you now know what wild bergamot is, you know what it does, you know where it grows. The question is what you will do with that knowledge. You can close this video and forget. You can keep buying supplements that cost 50 times more than free tea. You can keep trusting systems that profit from your confusion. Or you can walk outside, find the plant, harvest the leaves, brew the tea. The Ikarians did not read studies. They did not wait for FDA approval. They did not ask permission. They simply drank what grew around them, and they forgot to die. If this video showed you something valuable, subscribe to this channel before it gets taken down. We cover the plants, the medicines, and the forgotten knowledge that powerful industries spend billions making sure you never discover. Share this with someone who deserves to know. The tea is free, the knowledge is free, but only if it keeps spreading.